Madam Deputy President, I'm calling on this chamber to finally accept the science and acknowledge that we are in the midst of a climate emergency. I know many members across from me, and even a few of those behind me, tire of hearing about something that they fail to take seriously or perhaps don't even accept as fact. But I also know there are members on all sides who can't help but notice the growing state of panic that is beginning to take hold. Protest movements are growing around the world as people wake up to the fact that their governments are asleep at the wheel in the face of the greatest crisis our collective humanity has ever faced. Young people around the world are placing their hopes in a 16-year-old Swedish girl because Greta Thunberg is one of the few who has the courage to speak truth to power, while political leaders say it's too hard to take the necessary action. What these politicians are really saying is that it's too hard to stand up to the fossil fuel industry because the Labor, Liberal and National parties profit from their huge donations and the revolving door that's spinning so fast it's hard to keep track of all the former MPs, staffers and other party hacks who walk through it. However, I know there are members on both sides of this chamber who know that we are doing far from enough to deal with the climate emergency. The most recent United Nations report released ahead of the United Nations Climate Summit has said that business as usual will see temperatures rise by 2.9 to 3.4 degrees Celsius by the end of the century. Do members have any idea of the scale of unimaginable disasters that this would bring? In order to keep warming below 2 degrees Celsius, a scenario that would still see massive social, economic and environmental upheavals, countries around the world would need to triple their emissions targets, and that due to emissions continuing to rise past 2030, achieving the safe goal of limiting warming to 1.5 degrees Celsius would require a rapid global mobilisation unprecedented in human history. The Labor Party likes to talk about the climate emergency and being strong on climate action. But Labor has already indicated to me that they will amend my motion because they cannot quite bring themselves to admit that to prevent runaway climate chaos, we must phase out coal and gas and we must stop logging our native forests. We can't tell the people of New South Wales that we're acting on the climate emergency unless we do this. Labor needs to support the Greens motion as is and work with the unions to urgently develop a transition plan for affected workers. Have the courage to do this, because declaring a climate emergency does not mean closing every mine and shutting every plant tomorrow. But it does send a very strong message to those industries that their time has come and that we need to transform our society and economy into one that is clean, fair and sustainable. Now, the government, I'm sure, will boast of its stellar record on renewables and climate action and that it's striking the balance between growing the economy and taking action on climate. But it's not, and I know at least some government members know that. Our coal-fired power stations increased emissions by 550,000 tonnes to 50.3 million tonnes of CO2 equivalent in 2018, and rampant land clearing and logging, which releases carbon into the atmosphere, is still continuing, destroying precious carbon sinks. And it continues to approve new coal projects and will even change the law so that coal mines can't be stopped on the basis of their carbon emissions. For those in the room who are unlikely to be convinced by me, maybe listen to many in the business community who are also begging for action, like insurance companies who are already losing money to extreme weather events and are pushing up premiums. In this motion, I've set an aspirational goal of zero net emissions for New South Wales by 2030. This may sound extreme, but years of inaction and rising emissions requires an emergency response. It can be no more business as usual. If this government can bring in emergency powers to build more dams, it can bring in emergency powers to rein in our carbon pollution and rapidly transition to 100% renewable energy and net zero emissions by 2030. I am calling on all members who are not blinded by ideology or climate denialism, who do acknowledge the science, who truly understand the gravity of the situation we are in, to support the Greens motion to declare a climate emergency, as well as the comprehensive plan of action attached to it. Think about what you will tell your grandchildren when asked about how you responded when the world started to burn. I commend the motion to the House.